Hello, my friend. You have tuned into Renegade Files, your portal into the hidden currents of history, covert culture, and paranormal experience. You are now in the company of outcasts. I'm your host, Lex Gordon, transmitting this unauthorized broadcast from the Jungle Villa Outpost, deep in the uncharted tropics. This is Renegade Files episode 96, 3-Eye Atlas, Interstellar Visitor, or Alien False Flag. In this episode of Renegade Files, we travel from the outer edges of the solar system to the inner workings of human psychology. We begin with 3-Eye Atlas, the newest interstellar object tracked by NASA and studied by Harvard's Avi Loeb, whose bold theories challenge traditional science and invite speculation about the origins of these cosmic visitors. But as Loeb's research enters the public arena, it becomes fuel for a larger story, one that connects discovery with deception. We chase this visitor from the deep void of interstellar space, an object that arrived from a place no telescope had ever seen before, moved in ways no comet should, and left behind a trail of questions that still glow like ionized dust in the cosmos. From there, we descend into the shadow world of the alien invasion false flag, the modernized version of Project Bluebeam, where advanced technologies and coordinated media narratives could fabricate a global extraterrestrial crisis. By examining how fear can be engineered and monetized, this episode reveals how easily science and spectacle can merge into social control. Finally, we tie it all together in a deep analysis of what this convergence means for our future. Are we on the brink of genuine contact, or just another manipulation designed to keep humanity divided and afraid? In the end, we discover that awareness itself is the antidote, and that shining light on the truth behind the illusion is the surest way to disarm it. Come now into the dark beyond, where science meets secrecy, and together we unravel the connections in episode 96, 3-Eye Atlas, Interstellar Visitor, or Alien False Flag. Interstellar Visitor, false flag. First, here are some easy ways you can help Renegade Files if you like and appreciate what I do here. Click follow for this show wherever you listen, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Then, when you have a second, drop us a 5-star review there if you think we deserve it. Also, visit and share our website at therenegadefiles.com. Everything else I'll mention in the next few seconds can be found through links at that website. So, that is your one-stop Renegade Files shop, and it's the easiest single link to share the show with your friends, and it's therenegadefiles.com. From there, you can help crowdfund the show and get bonus episodes and more at patreon.com/renegadefiles. And thank you if you're an RFA agent in the Renegade Files agency on Patreon already. You make this show possible. You can listen, watch, and follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. Just look for Renegade Files there and hit follow. And subscribe to my free Substack newsletter called Renegade Signals. All these links are in both the show notes and at therenegadefiles.com. Thanks for all of your support. Now, let's get into this deep one. Part 1. The 3-Eye Atlas Object and the Renegade Astronomer. For some, the 3-Eye Atlas is a celestial tourist, a chunk of ice and dust that wandered light years to graze our sun and drift away again. For others, it's a data point that redefines what we now know about how planets form and solar systems interact. But For those of us who watch the shadows behind the official statements, it might be something else entirely. The last piece of a much larger narrative about control, fear, and the weaponization of wonder. Because as mainstream media stories about strange objects from the stars grow more frequent, so too do rumblings about another kind of event on the horizon, a manufactured crisis on a cosmic scale. What some researchers call the alien invasion false flag. If you've been around these hidden corridors long enough, you may know the name Project Bluebeam. It's a plan first whispered in the 1990s by investigative journalists and UFO insiders who claimed that a faction within the military-industrial complex was developing technology to simulate a global religious event or an alien invasion, to unify humanity under a single government, or to justify massive spending in the name of planetary defense. At the time, it sounded outrageous, but in the decades since, the world has changed in ways that make such scenarios not only possible, but almost predictable. We live in an era of digital illusion and algorithmic psychology, where a well-timed video clip can reshape public beliefs overnight. We don't need flying saucers over major cities to convince the world that we're not alone. We just need a few well-crafted images, some official confirmation, and a population conditioned to accept crisis as normal. The idea of a false flag alien invasion is not about little green men. It's about power. It's about a mechanism through which governments and corporations can redirect resources, restructure societies, and centralize authority while maintaining the illusion that they are acting for our own survival. And so, as 3i Atlas slides through the outer edges of our solar system, the news feeds light up with stories of strange signals, military UFO task forces, and unidentified aerial phenomena videos released by the Pentagon itself. What was once denied is now paraded as official acknowledgement. A new narrative is forming, one that links space mysteries with national security, one that frames the sky as both a source of fear and a source of funding. Here's the pattern. A story emerges about an object no one can explain. Official sources leak documents to mainstream outlets. Defense budgets quietly expand, and the public conversation turns from "are we alone" to "how do we protect ourselves?" The shift is subtle but powerful. The mystery of existence becomes the business of security. That is the connection we'll explore on this episode, the fine line between cosmic discovery and psychological operations, between the wonders of astronomy and the weapons of information. Think about it. NASA announces that an object from another star system is passing through our neighborhood. Harvard's Avi Loeb suggests that it might be artificial. News networks pick up that story with a tone halfway between science and science fiction. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense forms new committees for aerospace anomalies. Funding flows to classified projects, and talk shows float the idea of preparing for an extraterrestrial threat. Is this just all good storytelling, or is it stagecraft? Maybe the public is being gently conditioned to accept the idea of an alien arrival not because it's imminent, but because it's useful. In the coming segments, we'll look closely at the facts behind the 3i Atlas discovery, its composition, trajectory, and the questions it raises for both scientists and skeptics. We'll trace the career of Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer who has become both respected and ridiculed for suggesting that some cosmic objects could be technological artifacts from elsewhere. And we'll follow the money and the messages that connect to the rumored Project Bluebeam template, a script for a grand illusion in the sky. Imagine a clear night in the Caribbean. The air is thick with the smell of salt and rain. The sea, black glass stretched beneath 1 billion stars. And somewhere up there, beyond the vast visible point of light, a small, frozen object is drifting through the dark. Not orbiting our sun, but cutting across its domain, like a visitor passing through a foreign land. It comes from nowhere we can name, and moves with a purpose we don't understand. At the same time, down here on Earth, governments are quietly launching new satellites, reactivating defense protocols, and conducting joint military exercises under the banner of aerospace threat awareness. In the background, a different kind of signal is transmitting, a media frequency that plays the tune of fear disguised as wonder. You see, the psychology of disclosure has evolved. Gone are the days when governments flatly denied the existence of UFOs. Now, they confirm them just enough to make you curious, just enough to make you look up, and just enough to justify the next billion-dollar program that no one is allowed to question. Every era has its own myth of the apocalypse. In the Middle Ages, it was the end of days. In the atomic age, it was nuclear warfare. In our digital age, it may be the threat from the stars, the threat that might never arrive because it doesn't have to. The belief in it is enough to serve a purpose. That's the essence of the false flag concept. You don't need an actual invasion. You only need the appearance of one. A well-timed series of images, a few credible statements, and a population already primed by decades of movies and mythology to expect the sky to open. From there, the rest writes itself. Emergency powers, tax levies, security contracts, and new laws passed under the banner of planetary defense. How big and expensive does that sound? We've seen this formula before. Different threats, same strategy. And when you realize that the human imagination is now a resource to be exploited, you begin to see why the narrative of an extraterrestrial menace is so useful. It's the perfect enemy, limitless, invisible, and impossible to defeat. It justifies perpetual mobilization. And yet, in this same story, there's room for something else. Hope, curiosity, the idea that not everything is unknown and not everything is a weapon of fear. This is why voices like Avi Loeb are important, whether you agree with him or not, because his work forces the scientific community to ask dangerous questions again, to look beyond the approved boundaries of inquiry. And that is something that the power structures of any kind fear the most: open minds. So now we trace the trajectory of 3I Atlas through the void, while tracking the trajectory of a different object, the idea of fear itself. And this moves through our culture, our media, and our minds. Because whether this interstellar visitor is natural or artificial, its arrival is being used to shape a story that serves someone's purpose. The only question is, whose? If we want to understand why 3I Atlas hit the culture like a signal flare, we should begin with a simple astronomical truth. Only 3 times in recorded history have we spotted a confirmed visitor that did not originate in our own solar system, crossing our neighborhood on a hyperbolic path. First came All right. First came you would think I would know. I've heard it said a million times how to say it. Oumuamua. How about that? All right. First came One-Eye Oumuamua in 2017. Remember that? Then Two-Eye Borisov, much easier to say, in 2019. And now 3I Atlas. We're getting better and better at these names. And it was discovered in July of 2025 by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. That's what ATLAS stands for. Its orbit is unmistakably interstellar, which means it comes from beyond our solar system, right? from another sun, as it were. Its path is open-ended, and its presence a rare chance to sample the chemistry of someplace we can only imagine. NASA's public brief sets the baseline. They say this object's past trajectory traces back beyond our sun. Its orbit never closes, and its flyby is a once-in-a-generation window into another star system. Very cool. And that's from NASA Science. The differences among the three interstellar visitors shape much of the debate. Oumuamua behaved like a riddle. It did not grow the familiar dusty trail of a comet. It exhibited a small, non-gravitational acceleration, and it left scientists arguing over whether it was an exotic shard of nitrogen ice, a hydrogen iceberg, a pancake flat shard of something else entirely. That inconclusive flight put Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb at the center of a storm when he proposed that sunlight pressure on a thin object could expand and explain its odd motion, raising the possibility of an artificial origin. Now, whether you agree with him or not, the claim was specific, quantitative, and published. 2I Borisov, by contrast, looked like a classic comet. It was rich in volatile ices and shedding a comet tail with textbook clarity. It reassured most astronomers that interstellar objects would usually present identities that are natural and familiar. That set the stage for 3I Atlas to arrive as the tiebreaker in the public mind. Would it be a second Borisov, reinforcing the natural comet narrative, or would it rekindle the questions of Oumuamua, left behind by an object behaving in some way that defied expectations? So early reporting framed the stakes in exactly those terms. The third interstellar object as an unprecedented laboratory for verifying what is common and what is truly weird beyond our sun. What is 3I Atlas exactly? Well, as of what we know right now, NASA and major outlets agree on several core facts. It is an interstellar comet detected on July 1, 2025, on a hyperbolic trajectory inbound for a late October 2025, what they call a perihelion, which is when it goes as closest to the sun. So an inside the orbit of Mars pass. It poses no threat to Earth, hallelujah. And while its coma and activity have evolved, it has already forced refinements to the standard plague book because some of its emissions and timing do not quite match the averages we see from the typical long-period comets born in our own Oort cloud. That is the heart of the science. So basically, each interstellar object is a sample from an alien assembly line, and each one has, so far, confounded new expectations, and that's from Reuters. And when they say alien assembly line, they mean an object that comes from somewhere outside of Earth, right? Several early observances reported water-related signatures at distances from the sun where water usually remains locked in ice in ordinary comets. Unless there are structural quirks or more volatile ices acting as subliminal triggers. Using Neil Gehrels' Swift Observatory, researchers identified hydroxyl emissions consistent with water outgassing, likening the flux to a pressurized hydrant far from the warmth where standard sublimation takes off. So it was unusual, essentially, that this thing had what appeared to be steam trail or some kind of condensation trail where water would normally remain 100% frozen because where it is so cold, mystifying scientists, right? The result pushes models towards scenarios that include crustal fracturing, icy clumps breaking free, or unusual internal layering. In the broader context, it distinguishes Atlas from the dryness of Oumuamua and from the carbon monoxide-rich Borisov. These would be the three most recent or ever visitors of the same type. 3 chemistries and 3 puzzles, and that comes from Wired Magazine, the general analysis. So on top of that, a wave of pieces summarized further anomalies under active study. a reported nickel signature without matching iron in some analysis, the unusual polarization of scattered light, and a faint anti-tail, a structure suggestive of particle dynamics not perfectly symmetric with the sun's radiation pressure. Most working astronomers still lean toward natural explanations because the null hypothesis is strong in planetary science and because comets are famous for producing surprises when their layered ice is cracked. But the reported signals are exactly the kind that draw broad attention because compositional ratios and geometry are where you first notice something that's not behaving like the average, right? Much of that from The Guardian. So when a new interstellar object appears, one name inevitably surfaces, and we've talked of him already, Avi Loeb. How do you say his name? Avi Loeb. Partly because he was among the first to stake a bold claim on Oumuamwa's origin and defend it in the literature, and partly because he has spent the years since building the infrastructure for testing such claims through the Galileo project. He is an establishment astrophysicist by resume, but an insurgent voice by posture, and that combination makes him a unique polarizing character. He argues that dismissing technological hypotheses on principle is unscientific, and I would agree. And he made challenges to the field of instruments in the sky in ways that can actually falsify human-made illusions or confirm truly exotic sources. So he isn't a crack. He's a serious scientist. He's just probably more open-minded than many others in his field. Okay? My humble opinion. So for that reason, he's been praised as a necessary provocateur and criticized for courting headlines. Arguably true, maybe not. It just seems that the field of study that he's involved in is headline worthy. That's all. Both reactions have made him more, not less, central to this story. Some of that assessment comes from Scientific American, and Loeb's public writing on 3i Atlas riffs more on a theme that has developed since Oumuamwa, and that stakes transcend any single object. In one recent essay, he asked outright if humanity should be happier if Atlas turned out to be a spacecraft, not because he's betting on that conclusion, but because this discovery of an artifact would snap our priorities back toward exploration and away from our ground-level feuds. Okay? This is very wise. He says, quote, "Humanity desperately needs a wake-up call." End quote. He follows up with, quote, "With that perspective in mind, would it be better if 3i Atlas happens to be a spacecraft?" End quote. Agree or disagree, it is a clean statement of the value proposition he sees in taking the question seriously, which is part of the point here, right? In another article reflecting on Atlas's orbital geometry, Loeb noted that the most opportune window for high-energy, close-approach maneuvers, the kind of propulsion-savvy mission planner might expect, unfolds inconveniently while the object is near solar conjunction with the Earth's point of view. So that's a fancy way to say we're not going to be able to see it at that time. So his question is, quote, "Was this a mere coincidence or a result of orbital design and basic aeronautics?" End quote. So basically what he's asking in this question is the fact that the best time to gather data is when the geometry is worse, and he's asking, is that by design of some intelligence, knowing that it's going to pass Earth? I don't know. Very interesting observation, though. Mainstream coverage has split into three lanes. First, careful institutional explainers from NASA and the National Science Desk, and that frames Atlas as a third data point on interstellar composition with neutral language and a clear emphasis on no threat and rare research opportunity, okay, which is sober and probably accurate. Second, seasoned science journalists who pushed the chemical and dynamical oddities, asking what conditions in other systems could produce these oddities, and contrasting Atlas's behavior with what we saw on the previous interstellar objects. The third, headline-driven outlets go straight to the most cinematic interpretation, putting numbers on the odds that Atlas could be artificial and foreshadowing Loeb's most quotable lines. The three-pronged attack of the media is not new, but in the interstellar era, it's particularly divided. Very interesting. On the subject side of the aisle, we have instructive patterns, okay? Skeptical planetary scientists who are highly critical of the artificial origin hypothesis for Oumuamua and now an Atlas are drawing like clear lines. They're sort of staking their ground. They remind audiences that comets often break the rules, that selection effects bias, we have that when we detect something unusual, and that the best cure for anomalies is patient observation, sort of time-resolved study, okay? Some, like Arizona State's Stephen Desch, whose earlier work argued that Oumuamua could be explained without invoking technology, point to Atlas's observed comet behavior as further reason to resist sensational leaps. Okay. Others concede that the nickel emissions claim and water activity distances are intriguing and worth pressing with better instruments, but they don't immediately jump to an alien explanation. The net effect is a healthy, real-time, public lab meeting discussion about what the data show and what they do not, essentially. UFO researchers and anomalist communities, for their part, read Atlas through a different historic lens. After half a decade of accelerating official statements about UAPs, congressional hearings, a bunch of military videos, and a few of those very good, and the normalization of the "we don't know what these are" party line, any new interstellar visitor lands on a primed public. In that context, some argue that the wave of Atlas coverage is either sincere scientific moments or the latest entry in an engineered narrative designed to condition mass audiences to accept a looming extraterrestrial theme. So here we get into something very touchy, especially in the paranormal UFO fringe analysis community. This question of, is something new that's officially, disclosed? Is it good news and revelation of something real? Or is it just more conditioning? That's sort of the point, the place where we are right now. It's discouraging in a way, but keep looking up, okay? So anyway, the same article from The Guardian says that we could read this with open-minded curiosity or as scripted messaging, depending on which priorities you bring to the screen. And yeah, I would agree. That's why the audience is so polarized over this. It's interesting, isn't it? So because this episode examines not only the science, but also the ecosystem of attention around it, it matters to us which voices are shaping this conversation. One of the largest genre shows to weigh in recently is the Somewhere in the Skies podcast. We've talked about them before. They combine breaking news commentary with this sort of now familiar constellation of disclosure and whistleblowers, and Atlas updates in a live segment is their latest show. It's called UAP Crash at Area 51, Shocking 3-Eye Atlas News, Space Force Whistleblower Tells All. Quite a long title and provocative to say the least. So that show's audience is commonly estimated in the 6-figure range across the platforms, and rock on for them. And when they frame Atlas as part of a cascade of shocking developments, it signals how tightly the object has been fused to this current disclosure storyline. This is not a lab result, it's a culture result. And it illustrates how millions of people are interpreting this next phase of information release. It's very interesting when you sort of step back and look at these things in these ways. So Coast to Coast AM, the genre's biggest legacy brand by far, also amplified how the Atlas conversation is unfolding by posting news blurbs and highlighting this claim that there might be artificial origin. So they take a scientific approach of kind of cautiously defining the paranormal possibilities, right? They've always done a good job of that, going all the way back to the Art Bell days, and everyone knows I love Art Bell. Art Bell is a legend, and let's see here. It's funny because Avi Loeb's comments sort of summarized down to the point where what he tells us is when a mass audience paranormal radio institution like Coast to Coast treats this object as a live mystery and a potential craft, it moves out of this specialist echo chamber and into the late night mainstream myth. And that's very, very clever observation, and it's true. I think it's part of just this idea, like, you know, the old saying used to be like, you know, you've made it when you're on Johnny Carson. So if you're a paranormal subject, you know you've made it if you're on Coast to Coast AM, right? So this is the pipeline by which a telescope result becomes dinner table conversation, right? Some data turns into chatting points. It's fascinating. To understand why 3i Atlas has become such a situation, we have to compare the headline language with the primary sources. So in the careful venue, we get third known interstellar object, perhelion, late October, no threat, unique opportunity to probe its composition, right? In the enthusiastic but still technical press, you get strong verbs about water emission far from the sun, hypothesized structures, and in the tabloids and like the more sensational arenas, and I'm talking about in the mainstream version of those things, not the actual clinical investigative shows like the ones you and I love. Anyway, so like the tabloids and the talk shows, what you get in that framework is this like quote unquote city-sized object, never before seen alloys, and little odd quotes like weather forecast mixed in there. It's like scientists tending to jump into the sensationalism arena, and it's rare. Not many of them will tie their wagon to that train. So anyway, these are human-driven stories, and the story of an interstellar visitor is one of the oldest ones that we tell as humanity. It goes all the way back to the star children in the Native American cultures and other first people sort of legends, where we have visitors from somewhere else that came to help us. It's fascinating, and we discover sort of who we are by how we together as a society respond to these moments, don't we? So anyway, even the numbers have become narrative props. Velocity at perhelion, distances, emission rates. Wired reported water-linked outgassing at roughly tens of kilograms per second. So that leads us to interpret the size. The scale of this thing is large. Ordinary water and ice is quiet in space, and that this prompts sort of these novel investigations and explanations of what might be happening in a situation like that. From a pure method standpoint, here's what matters most right now. Observations across wavelengths and platforms must be stitched together into a coherent timeline, and that's for those of us who are watching this thing move and sort of concerned about what it might do. And is it natural, is it unnatural? Those become other discussions. Earth-based telescopes will lose the object near solar conjunction and then regain it on the other side. So space-based assets can fill in that gap, and Spectra needs cross-calibration to settle basic compositional questions like nickel to iron ratios. Photometry over rotation cycles can constrain like the shape models, and dust dynamics that we can analyze to test whether any anti-tail or asymmetric features are consistent with known particle size distributions and solar wind interactions or not. So that's a technical way of saying, is the exhaust that's coming off of this thing or the trail it's leaving behind a natural dust situation, or is it indication of a non-human intelligence propulsion mechanism? So that's a serious question, and ironically, it's a serious question that the mainstream scientists are asking, whether they admit it or not. And the way we know is their admission that they're so concerned about what is this thing going to do when we can't see it, and let's use some Earth-based telescopes and then coordinate that data with what we find from the space-based telescopes that may be able to see this thing when we can't look at it because it's behind the sun or in front of the sun. too near the sun for us to look at it. And then let's compare the two situations to see if this object is leaving a natural trail or if what is behind it looks like it's being manipulated in an intelligent manner. Fascinating. There's a third option that nobody has proposed yet, which is that maybe this thing is a natural object that was flung here by an intelligence. Now, you get into that, and that's a whole nother discussion, an entirely different show. An interesting proposition, though. So Avi Loeb keeps pressing the larger point in between these equations. In his words, the right kind of discovery would force us to reorder our priorities. Back to his quote about we desperately need a wake-up call, right? So any way you look at this, this is a debate that refuses to die, and it's about who we get to be if the sky sends us a letter that we can't ignore. One sort of colorful way to think about it. Meanwhile, the rest of the scientific field keeps doing what scientific people do when presented with a mystery. They divide their labor. Some groups track brightness trends and morphology. Others chase narrow spectral lines and model volatile transport. A third group will be watching polarization angles and dust grain scattering regimes. So there's this quiet confidence underneath all of that chatter that the combination of these, what they discover in the end, will close in on whatever the truth is. In parallel, a separate public square keeps asking if the very strangeness of these certain details hints at intent. That split is not really dysfunction. It's a healthy tension between hypothesis testing and meaning making. It's a hyper-connected arena, and it's really cool to like stand back and look at it like that so that we stop this us and them battle where the everyday people don't trust the scientists and the scientists don't think the everyday people are smart enough to understand anything. What we need is, like I said, a hyper-connected arena where both of our opinions matter when we are exploring something that neither of us has an answer to. Okay? You heard it here. So, another reason that 3I Atlas has arrived with such a extra charge is that since 2017, everything has sort of changed. Oumuamua came at the front end of the current UAP disclosure cycle, if we can even call it that, but that would be a phrase to describe it. So before these Pentagon videos, congressional hearings, and all this bipartisan language about what to do about these unknowns, today the environment's different. Space agencies produce very cool descriptions on interstellar comets. Defense committees hold briefings on aerial anomalies. Podcasts like this one and others look at these topics, sort of blend the whistleblower testimony with the archival information. We try to bring this whole thing together. The public's priorities have moved. They expect the next shoe to drop any minute. That expectation blends honest curiosity with this feedback loop of fear and fascination. Every anomaly, therefore, is read either as evidence of contact or the setup for the next narrative about the contact. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's fun. It's good times, man. It's like, you guys wanted it, let's get into it. Now stuff's flying at us from outer space, we don't know what it is, let's all try to figure it out together. Bring on the scientists, point your telescope, analyze your data, and then tell us honestly what you find, and together we'll make decisions about it. It's not only the scientists running the world, thank God. These nerds are gonna kill us, like certain people always say. So anyway, it's worth stating, though, that the two most defensible current positions in plain language are that 3I Atlas is a natural interstellar comet with some weird cosmological ratios and some odd timing, and that in the end, it's ultimately consistent with known physics once we get enough data. That view is favored by most of every normal scientist who look at it. Position number 2 is that the anomalies seen so far justify keeping this technological hypothesis on the table and designing observations specifically capable of either proving it or falsifying it. And it seems like that's what the scientists are doing, although they might not be overtly claiming that in the titles of their papers. These are the ways that we should move forward when we're dealing with these conjunction gaps. We're talking about critical maneuver windows. This is the Avi Loeb posture. Let's debate what we find, and then let's look deeper. You know, it's not about like who believes in aliens and who doesn't. It's about how aggressively we should instrument reality when the cost of missing a civilization scale discovery is so high. Rock on, you know? It's cool that we have Harvard scientists that think in those terms. Even one, maybe outlier, renegade one, but okay, that's awesome. Since this is what we do here, we need one more layer to acknowledge, and we're going to park this for later in the episode, and that is the interstellar object arrived at a moment when narratives about extraterrestrial presence and national security are genuinely useful to institutions that benefit from fear-based budgets and emergency-style authority. So let's not forget that. It is not conspiratorial to note that threat framing travels faster through the bloodstream of media than wonder framing, and that technology and an ambiguous object from deep space is the perfect canvas for these projections. We will dive into this a little deeper in the next parts, so stay tuned, but the rumored alien invasion false flag and Project Bluebeam lens become very relevant. The responsible move is to keep the science clean, the quotes sourced, and the questions alive. That's how we roll. So to close this section, let's think about what Avi Loeb asks us. Would it be better if 3i Atlas was a natural object or a spacecraft? What would be better for humanity? I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question, sure. It falls into the shocking sort of headlines. You know, we have coast-to-coast running segments and headlines about astronomers tracking a visitor from another star, and then when you read it, it's just about a comet. But they keep putting that language in there. So Avi asks us what would be better, you know, one way or the other. It's just a provocative question. That provocative question is sort of the baseline for this entire investigation. We have an interstellar object with distinctive behavior, a field engaged in real-time data analysis to decode it, and a high-profile scientist urging us to keep the artifact hypothesis on the table. That's the alien hypothesis. And a media machine primed to turn any of his language into a cosmic referendum. So let's not get too caught up in the hype, but let's keep an open mind as we look at this thing. In the next section, we're going to widen the aperture to a parallel storyline that comes alongside of this Atlas conversation, and that is Part 2, Alien Invasion False Flag and Blue Beam Reboot. The idea of a false flag event has always lived in the twilight between reality and rumor. In military language, a false flag is an operation designed to appear as though it were carried out by someone else, an act of deception meant to justify a particular reaction. History provides plenty of examples to make the term legitimate, from fabricated incidents that sparked wars to psychological operations designed to sway population. This tactic is old. What makes it newly potent is technology. What makes it newly cosmic is our current situation. Among the most enduring of these modern myths is the concept of Project Bluebeam. As I said earlier, it first entered public awareness in the 90s, when investigative writer Serge Monast published a series of papers alleging that a covert multinational effort was underway to simulate the second coming, I know that sounds crazy, but that was sort of what the framework was. It could also be used as an alien arrival using holographic projections, psychological manipulation, and advanced electromagnetic weapons. Monast claimed the goal was to usher in a single global government through a staged crisis that would unite the planet under a centralized authority. He described this as a 4-phase operation: the breakdown of traditional belief systems, the projection of massive 3-dimensional images in the sky, the transmission of synthetic thought into human consciousness via low-frequency signals, and the final unveiling of a savior figure who would lead humanity into a new order. When Monast died suddenly in 1966 of a reported heart attack, his followers elevated him to martyr status. To skeptics, Project Bluebeam was a paranoid fantasy. To believers, a leaked blueprint. And in the years since, the world has caught up with many of its premises. The capacity to project hyperreal imagery into the atmosphere? Done deal. To simulate voices through directed energy? Also possible. And to manipulate mass perception through digital media? Okay, you're getting the idea here? So what sounded like science fiction in the 1990s is now a collection of features of our day-to-day life. Not through lasers in the clouds, but through screens in our hands. To understand why the Project Bluebeam narrative has resurfaced in the wake of 3I Atlas, you have to see the psychological soil it grows in. The human mind evolved to recognize patterns and threats. It does not like ambiguity. When confronted with something unexplained in the sky, people reach for stories that restore meaning, even if those stories are terrifying. And governments know this. So do intelligence agencies. During the Cold War, UFOs were used as cover for classified aircraft programs. The public's fascination became a convenient shield for secrecy. But in the 21st century, the line between cover and narrative has blurred. When official agencies began acknowledging unidentified aerial phenomena and promising disclosure, the old denial strategy flips. Now, belief itself becomes the tool. The modern form of Project Bluebeam is not about projecting ships above cities, at least not yet. Right now, it's about projecting ideas. It's a social technology powered by media saturation. What we're dealing with here is AI-generated imagery and algorithmic amplification. A powerful combo. When a story about an interstellar object, a Pentagon task force, or a mysterious signal from outer space starts to circulate across hundreds of millions of screens within hours, the effect is indistinguishable from personal revelation. The audience experiences a collective vision. The projector doesn't have to be in orbit, it's in your hand. So, there are researchers who argue that this is the natural evolution of perception management. If you can make a population believe in a threat, even briefly, you can redirect vast sums of money and justify intrusive policies. The Cold War did this with communism, the War on Terror did this with extremism, and now the war in space might do this with extraterrestrials. The unifying principle is always the same. Fear is profitable, and uncertainty is the currency that buys compliance. A clear sign of this shift appeared in 2023, when several major news outlets began floating headlines about preparing for contact. The United Nations held panels on planetary defense, and the U.S. Space Force announced new monitoring systems for near-Earth anomalies. The budget lines for such projects are often buried under innocuous names like orbital debris mitigation or aerospace threat evaluation. But collectively, they form a global infrastructure of surveillance pointed not at nations but at the heavens. For most citizens, this is framed as scientific prudence. For others, it looks like the scaffolding of a blue beam project taking shape. A system that can both watch the skies and, if needed, control the story about what is being seen there. Even within the intelligence community, there are whispers that perception itself has become the new battlefield. One recently retired information warfare strategist described it as, quote, operating in the cognitive domain, end quote. That phrase means exactly what it sounds like, shaping thought directly at scale. If you can seed a belief, feed it with plausible evidence, and reinforce it through social proof, you can steer behavior without firing a shot. In that sense, the ultimate false flag isn't an event at all. It's an idea that convinces people to demand the change for themselves. The possible link between 3I Atlas and this psychology terrain lies in timing and narrative. Within weeks of Atlas's detection, several entertainment and news conglomerates ran speculative pieces suggesting that the next step after disclosure might be an open encounter, or at least a public emergency related to something entering our solar system. Defense officials used the language of vigilance. Talk show hosts spoke of readiness, and tucked between the headlines, contractors announced new public-private initiatives in planetary awareness and orbital coordination. The messaging moved in harmony, as if choreographed. Not proof of conspiracy, but evidence of coherence. The central question, then, is whether humanity is being prepared for revelation or manipulation. Both require the same infrastructure: sensors in orbit, cameras on the ground, and narratives in your smartphone hand. If 3I Atlas were natural, the apparatus would still benefit. It keeps the funding streams open, and it keeps everybody wondering, guessing, and debating. If 3I Atlas were artificial, the apparatus would benefit even more. It provides the crisis. Either way, the result is control through attention. The sky becomes a screen, and the population becomes an audience that can be guided toward unity or division depending on what's needed. Consider the pattern of recent global emergency situations: pandemic rehearsals, cyber attack exercises, probably one of the most terrifying one, planetary defense war games. Each one conditions the public to expect coordinated responses to large-scale threats. The next logical scenario, whether it involves a meteor, a probe, or an apparent fleet of spacecrafts, fits the same template. When it happens, or when it appears to happen, the mechanisms of response will already be in place, and the storylines will already be written. Is that convenient, or what? It's important to note that none of this requires the actors to be consciously villainous. Bureaucracies operate by inertia. Big agencies justify their existence through their activities, and corporations seek profit in new markets. When those motives converge under a theme as emotionally potent as protecting Earth, the machine runs itself. Project Bluebeam, in this view, is not a secret project. It's the emergent behavior of a species that monetizes its own needs. Now, imagine how effective a staged cosmic emergency would be in today's environment. Augmented reality, synchronized broadcast, drones equipped with light projection, and AI voice synthesis could together generate an experience indistinguishable from a real invasion for anyone without direct verification tools. In a world where even verified images can be dismissed as deep fakes, the authenticity threshold has collapsed. The perfect illusion no longer needs to fool everyone. Only enough people to tip consensus. Once consensus tips, the rest follows automatically. Emergency decrees, new security architectures, and a cultural reset around a singular fear. What makes this theory more than paranoia is the documented history of threat inflation. Defense analysts use that term to describe how potential dangers are exaggerated to secure funding or justify preemptive action. In the late 1940s, Soviet capabilities were routinely overstated to accelerate the arms race. In the 2000s, WMD narratives followed this same curve. The extraterrestrial threat is simply the next threat inflation, one that unites the human race under the banner of self-preservation, but at the cost of individual discernment. And of course, there's an economic angle. A simulated alien menace could unlock budgets dwarfing those of any previous war. Space-based weapons, orbital platforms, planetary shields, all can be sold as necessary measures. The populace, newly afraid, would demand them. And every launch, every contract, every surveillance satellite would tighten the web of oversight around our daily life. In that sense, the alien invasion false flag is the crown jewel of manufactured consent. An enemy so vast and terrifying that obedience feels like virtue. You don't need to believe that Project Bluebeam is real to see how its ideas already exist in our systems. The technology it imagined is now commonplace. The psychological mechanics it described are measurable. The only variable left is intent. Whether someone will choose to pull those levers in concert to create the illusion of a single, unifying alien threat. The deep night outside the Jungle Villa outpost hums with the sound of insects. The rainforest air is heavy with mist, and lightning flickers in the clouds above the horizon. You step out onto the landing, look up through the canopy, and for a moment the clouds thin, just enough to reveal a streak of light crossing the sky, steady, deliberate, unfamiliar. You tell yourself it's a satellite, but somewhere deep inside an old instinct stirs. The one that remembers campfires and constellations, and the fear that what watches from above may not be human. Down in the populated valleys, the local radio murmurs a bulletin about increased orbital activity. Somewhere else, thousands of miles away, people scroll through their feeds and see the same streak of light. Hashtagged, framed, replayed. A shared vision, globally synchronized. And as you watch it fade, you wonder whether the sky has become a mirror reflecting not reality, but our collective dream of contact, a dream that someone, somewhere, knows exactly how to sell. Back inside, the hum of electronics fills the air. Screens pulse with data streams, sensor logs, satellite telemetry. Algorithmic projections fill the corkboards of the Jungle Villa Outpost production laboratory. Somewhere among the graphs, a new story is being written. One that doesn't need to be true to be effective. One that will shape how we think, how we spend, and how we obey. As this narrative machine gathers momentum, the role of the outcast becomes clarity itself. Discernment is our resistance. The most subversive act in a mediated world is to verify for yourself. When governments announce that the skies are active, when feeds explode with footage of impossible craft, and when experts appear in synchronized unison to tell you what it all means, the smart move is not denial, it's patience and clarity. The truth will survive time, and lies rarely do. In the final analysis, the alien invasion false flag theory and Project Bluebeam are mirrors that reflect our fears of losing control to an external power. They reveal how easily we surrender that control when fear is the price for belonging. Whether the next great sky event is authentic or engineered, the responsibility remains the same: to question, to observe, and to think. Because in the end, no projection, no matter how bright, can blind those of us who refuse to close our eyes. And somewhere out there, beyond the noise of propaganda and plasma, beyond the calculated illusions and the genuine wonders, the real unknown still exists, silent, always indifferent, and watching us rehearse for contact. Part 3. The Convergence. Fear, control, and the future sky. Every story has a moment when the separate threads tighten and reveal their pattern. For our own era, that moment is now. The mystery of 3I Atlas and the machinery of the alien invasion false flag are no longer two stories running in parallel. They are strands of the same signal, resonating through science, media, and the human mind. One gives us the object, the other provides the interpretation. Together, they create a narrative that can begin to shape belief itself. If you've ever thought of joining the Renegade Files agency on Patreon, now is a great time to do it, because the dark intel files for this episode will blow your mind, and you can only dig into that research by becoming an RFA agent on Patreon. So do that today through a link in the show notes, or just visit patreon.com/renegadefiles, and we will welcome you with cheers and high fives. I cannot wait to see you in there, and thank you to all of the RFA agents on Patreon already. You make this show work. The rhythm of convergence begins with data. It travels through explanation and ends in myth. Somewhere along that path, the power shifts from observation to orchestration. In the past, myths were born in temples and whispered through generations. Now, they're manufactured in real time, carried on electromagnetic waves, and sculpted by big data companies. The story of the sky has become a broadcast, and whoever controls that signal controls the imagination of the world. The return of Avi Loeb's ideas about alien technology has had a curious effect. They grant permission for the public to think the unthinkable, while allowing institutions to harvest the resulting attention. When a Harvard astrophysicist says, quote, "Perhaps this is not natural," end quote, it legitimizes a possibility that was once the domain of science fiction. Within hours, that speculation becomes content, pushed, shared, monetized, and looped into a social bloodstream. Suddenly, the notion of intelligent beings in space no longer belongs to the fringe. It sits in the trending column next to the election polls and celebrity scandals. This is the mechanism of convergence, when wonder becomes leverage. Governments and defense agencies have learned that mystery itself can serve as policy. An ambiguous threat is the perfect instrument for long-term control because it never needs to materialize to remain effective. You can't defeat it, you can't measure it, and you can't prove it false. You can only prepare for it. And preparation is a perpetual state. It justifies surveillance, unites factions, and sustains the illusion of order. The trick is keeping the story believable, not provable. And few stories are more believable than the fear that something out there might one day come for us, come for our water, come for our children. The 3i Atlas event illustrates how easily this system can be activated. The data arrive. A trajectory, a composition, a few spectral lines. Scientists release papers. Journalists write summaries. The moment an authority figure uses the phrase unidentified, the feedback loop begins. Within days, the narrative mutates into unknown craft and then possible contact. You can track the transition like a heartbeat across the internet. The beauty of the design is that no one needs to issue the command. The system runs on its own hunger for attention. This convergence between science and manipulation does not mean that every astronomer or journalist is a part of it. It simply means the ecosystem has become self-aware. It rewards mystery over clarity, excitement over patience, and spectacle over precision. If you are an honest researcher trying to study a comet, your findings will still be interpreted through the machinery of myth. And if you are a government shaping perception, you could not ask for a better laboratory than a world addicted to headlines. The implications reach beyond astronomy. The same mechanism that turns an interstellar rock into a global event can turn any narrative into doctrine. Whether the subject is disease, war, or aliens, the pattern remains. Create the anomaly, amplify uncertainty, and offer control as the cure. This is how myth becomes management. To see how far the technique has evolved, consider how disclosure itself has changed its tone. 10 years ago, official agencies denied. 5 years ago, they evaded. Now they confirm just enough to keep you watching. We don't know what they are, they say, but we're studying it. That sentence is a masterpiece of psychological design. It triggers curiosity, fear, and deference all at once. It invites trust without withholding proof. The citizen becomes a spectator to his own conditioning, applauding every new mystery like an episode in a serialized show. Some analysts have argued that the alien narrative serves as a soft rehearsal for global governance. Whether or not that's true, it certainly provides the emotional infrastructure for it. If a threat appears that transcends borders, people will naturally look up for leadership. If that leadership arrives already prepared with pre-written treaties, command centers, and emergency powers, few will question the coincidence. They'll be too busy looking at the sky and arguing about whether it's real or not. This is how the Project Bluebeam has evolved from conspiracy to cautionary metaphor. It no longer requires secret cabals or hidden projectors. It requires only a synchronized network of incentives, a web of institutions that all profit from attention, fear, and unity under supervision. When those incentives align, the illusion can build itself. Meanwhile, the real mystery, the genuine frontier of interstellar science, risks being swallowed up by this spectacle. Each interstellar object should be a key to understanding the formation of worlds, the chemistry of distant suns, the diversity of cosmic history. But instead of awe, the dominant emotion has become suspicion. I'm as guilty as anyone. Every discovery must now prove its innocence before the court of public paranoia. The tragedy of our time is that we have turned the search for knowledge into another arena of control. The deeper danger of this convergence is psychological exhaustion. When every signal is suspect and every explanation feels staged, the public retreats into apathy. We see it all the time. That apathy is fertile soil for manipulation because a numb population will accept any narrative that promises meaning. Whether the next bright object in the sky is natural, artificial, or imaginary, the reaction will already be scripted. Panic first, policy second, reflection never. And yet, beneath the noise, there is a quiet rebellion taking shape. Independent researchers, amateur astronomers, and citizen scientists are building their own instruments, collecting their own data, and refusing to outsource curiosity to the institutions. They remind us that truth, like light, doesn't belong to anyone. It only needs a clear line of sight. If enough people learn to look for themselves, then the machinery of illusion begins to falter. Because in the end, the real enemy is not the unknown, it's the manipulation of the unknown. The universe is vast enough to hold both mysteries and hoaxes. Our task is to know which is which. If the next bright light in the sky becomes the pretext for global panic, remember this moment. Remember how easily fascination can become fear, and how quickly fear becomes obedience. The convergence we face now between science, spectacle, and control is not inevitable. It's a choice. Each of us decides whether to seek truth or consume narrative. Each of us decides whether to look through the telescope or through the television. And perhaps, when the next interstellar traveler passes our sun, we'll be ready to meet it with clarity instead of choreography. For now, the sky remains both a mirror and a screen, and what it reflects always depends on who's looking. My summary. So there we have it. 3 strands of a single story, woven through time and technology, converging into the same warning. The first strand, the arrival of 3I Atlas, reminds us of how quickly genuine discovery can slip from science into spectacle. What began as data points about an interstellar comet became a cultural mirror, reflecting the way curiosity and fear now share the same feed. The second strand, the resurrection of the alien invasion false flag and Project Bluebeam, shows how those fears can be sculpted into policy, how the suggestion of a cosmic threat can justify the tightening of earthly control. And the third strand, the convergence, reveals that the line between revelation and manipulation has become dangerously thin. In an age when mystery itself is monetized, the story of the sky is written by whoever controls that signal. The lesson is not that interstellar visitors are hoaxes, or that conspiracies are gospel. The lesson is that the truth requires context, and context requires vigilance. Science must remain open to wonder without surrendering to theater, and society must remain skeptical without collapsing into cynicism. Because the tools that can project a false flag invasion are the same tools that can illuminate a real discovery. The difference lies in intent and whether the public still cares to tell the difference. If an alien invasion false flag were ever attempted, its power would depend entirely on secrecy, spectacle, and speed. But those weapons weaken the moment light hits them. Every citizen who looks beyond the headline, who looks beyond their phone, who traces funding lines and asks why a narrative appears when it does, pulls another thread from the illusion. Transparency is kryptonite to deception. The more we expose who benefits, who builds, and who broadcasts, the less control the illusions retain. No projection, however vivid, can survive collective scrutiny. The truth doesn't need amplification, it only needs to be seen at all. So maybe that's our real defense system. Not satellites or lasers, but awareness. The willingness to investigate, to read the data for ourselves, to separate what we are told from what we can verify. How about that? It's slower than propaganda, but stronger in the long run. Because a population that understands how perception can be engineered is a population immune to control by fear. In the end, 3i Atlas is still out there, gliding through the blackness of space, indifferent to our arguments about what it means. It will leave our system the same way it entered, silent, precise, unbothered by the noise we make about it. And that is a fitting reminder. The universe doesn't conspire, it simply exists. It's we who weave meaning into the darkness, and if we choose wisely, that meaning can be truth. Thank you so much for traveling through this investigation with me, for questioning the narratives and listening for the signal beneath the static. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember that knowledge, not fear, is the real frontier. And here are some really easy ways that you can help Renegade Files if you like it. Click follow for this show right now wherever you're listening, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, so together we can meet here soon to explore the deepest covert stories where logic clashes with the official narrative. I am so happy to have you in the Renegade Files crew. If you have a second, drop us a 5-star review there in those places if you think we deserve it. Also, visit and share our website, therenegadefiles.com. You can find everything there, and it's the easiest way to send one link to your friend so they can find everything too. That's therenegadefiles.com. From there, you can help crowdfund this show and get bonus episodes and a lot more at patreon.com/renegadefiles. And thank you if you're an RFA agent in the Renegade Files agency on Patreon already. You make this show work. Thank you so much for all of your support. Until next Wednesday, I'm your host, Lex Gordon. Stay wild, interstellar child.